Good afternoon, everybody. How are we doing? Well, good evening.
Yeah, it's gone fast, hasn't it?
Yeah, time flies and you're having fun. My name is Xander Elliott. I'm a political reporter with The National. I'm here with Steph Braun. She is also a political reporter. And yeah, we're just basically here to run down what's been quite a wild day and look ahead. What can we expect now that Humza Yousaf is almost certainly going to become First Minister tomorrow? I mean, I can't really anticipate any problems with that. Can you, Steph?
No, I can't see that happening, especially as the Greens came out, just a sort of an hour or so afterwards, saying that they unanimously voted to back the Butte House Agreement and continue that. So I don't think there's going to be any issues with Humza Yousaf becoming First Minister. Anna Sarwar tweeted earlier and was talking as if that was going to happen no matter what. So I think everyone's accepting of that, and yeah, he'll be the first Muslim First Minister if he becomes First Minister, which is a really smashing glass ceiling moment, and the Muslim community have reacted with massive pride at that. It's a huge moment for them, and so I certainly don't see any problems with that tomorrow.
I was doing the global media roundup, which is on our website. If you want to go and look, we've got about 100 stories coming off the back of this SNP leadership race. Literally everything you could need to know. And I was just having a look at how the world media is reporting on the election of Humza Yousaf, and there is obviously a fair bit of interest in Pakistan. I mean, there was more than one website where it was on the top of the top stories was Humza Yousaf's election, or the top banner when you click on the website, it was there, Humza Yousaf elected. So yeah, I imagine it is a point of pride for people in the Muslim community and the Pakistani community to have someone who, I mean, if he does half the job Nicola Sturgeon did, will be representing Scotland on the world stage rather than just kind of internally in the UK, as much as the UK government and the Tory government might want that to be the case.
Yeah, and there was a really moving bit of his speech today where he talked about his grandparents coming over to Scotland from the Punjab, and how his grandfather worked in the Singer factory in Clydebank, and just how they never would have thought that their grandson would one day become the First Minister of Scotland. It really is quite staggering when you think about it in that sense. So that was a really sort of eye-catching bit of his speech, or ear-catching as it were.
But yeah, it definitely didn't seem set in stone. I know one member of our team, who I won't name on this live stream, has lost a little bit of money. They had some money down on somebody else winning the leadership election. So it definitely wasn't set in stone. I mean, I don't think anyone would have bet 100% that they saw this going either way. Was there anything in the results of the election that you found a little bit surprising?
Yeah, I did find it surprising that Ash Regan's second preferences actually led to Humza Yousaf's election. I think that a lot of people thought that Kate Forbes might win on second preferences from Ash. So that, I suppose, that was the most surprising bit of it. I don't think any of us were surprised that it was a close run thing between Kate Forbes and Humza Yousaf. I think we all knew that was going to be the case. I think perhaps some people might have been surprised that Ash Regan got as fewer votes as she did, and she certainly looked a little bit sour-faced at that herself today. I think everybody sort of reacted to the pictures and thought she doesn't look too happy, whereas Kate Forbes, she looked a bit more relieved that it was over, and she genuinely seemed quite happy for Humza Yousaf. So I suppose that, yeah, the Ash Regan's second preference votes going.
Yeah, let's have a little bit of a look at that. So there is, again, I've said it before, but I'll say it again. If you need any information at all about this leadership race, I would be surprised, probably even shocked, if you couldn't find it on our website. So I'm just going to read some of these numbers out from a story on our website right now. As it turned out, it was about 2-1 Ash Regan supporters went for Kate Forbes over Humza Yousaf. So 3,331 of them voted for Forbes, whereas 1,696 of them voted for Yousaf. I mean, a fair number of people, I think, were kind of half expecting Kate Forbes to win among Reagan supporters in a landslide. 2-1 is a form of landslide, I would say. But when that first round came out, Kate Forbes had, 40.7% of the vote. Ash Regan on 11.1% of the vote. Ash's supporters would have had to go on to Kate in just extraordinary numbers, upwards of 90%, in order for Yousaf not to get that final final push that he needed over the line. So when I heard the first round, when I heard that Kate was on 40%, Reagan on 11, I think it was kind of sealed at that point. But yeah. Staying on second preferences, I'd just like to note, obviously, there's a huge amount of commentary on how divided the party is, because 48% went for Forbes, 52% for Yousaf. But the second largest group of voters were the 9,500 odd people that voted for Kate Forbes and put Humza Yousaf as their second preference. So of Kate Forbes' initial 20 odd thousand voters before the second round, half of those essentially were looking to Yousaf for their second choice. I think if you've got half of the electorate backing the losing party, if that makes sense, I just don't think there's this maybe quite as much division as maybe is being talked about. I think maybe Yousaf isn't going to struggle to unite the party quite as much as some people maybe thought he would. So yeah, that'll be interesting going forward. We were talking just briefly before stuff. Moving forward now, what do we expect to see in the early days of a Yousaf government?
Yeah, well, he's talked about, I think the priority he said was the cost of living crisis, recovering and reforming the NHS. These are things that he would look to sort fairly early on. I suppose some people might be questioning the recover and reform the NHS aspect, being he's been health secretary for a while and obviously hasn't had an amazing record as health secretary so far. But he also talked about moving quickly to develop plans to extend childcare, to improve rural housing, and support small businesses. And in terms of independence, I think that a lot of activists will be interested in the fact that he said he'd put the drive for independence to fifth gear, and he'd sort of support grassroots activism quite a bit. And so I think people will be keen to see how he does that in the early days, because I think him and Kate Forbes, I suppose, were quite similar by the end in that they both tried to talk about reaching out to no voters and trying to get people on side. So, and I think that Humza Yousaf very much sees grassroots activism as key to that. So I think that people will be interested in how he goes forward with that.
It was interesting. Did he say, I didn't hear that, I haven't heard every speech as I've been looking at other things, but if he says that independence is going to go into fifth gear, that does beg the question of what gear they've been in until now.
I was thinking, what about sixth? Most cars have sixth.
My van's got six gears. Yeah, indeed.
Exactly.
I think I was reading an interesting analysis the other day about the possibility of a Kate Forbes win or a Humza Yousaf win. And it seemed that SNP support was going to be largely unaffected. The levels of people that were saying they're going to vote SNP was going to remain relatively stable, regardless of which one of the two won. But it was about who was voting SNP. So it looked like if Yousaf didn't win, the Greens were going to benefit hugely from these kind of left-wing progressives that are within the SNP would switch to the other pro-independence party. And if we had Kate Forbes, who's seen as a bit more fiscally conservative, and she was slightly more attractive to the Conservatives and the Labour voters, so they were thinking of switching to the SNP. So you end up with a big tent, which is what the SNP still is. But yeah, I'm just going to jump back. So for me, the first few months of this Yousaf government, and probably the rest of the year now, 2023, it's going to be some fights with the UK government on, isn't there? I mean, Yousaf has said that he's going to challenge the Section 35 order, which is blocking gender reform. So we should see a court battle over that, I imagine. I imagine the Section 30 requests for a second independence referendum won't exactly be a long protracted battle, but we'll see a quick request there. Yousaf's only saying that he's going to bring in a concession for small businesses on the deposit return scheme, whereas Reagan and Kate Forbes were a lot more dismissive of the possibility of success come August. So we could well see the UK government move to block that as well, which would be twice in 1 year after 24 years of no uses of the Section 35 order. So we could, for all the talk of wanting to work together coming from Rishi Sunak, we could be seeing actually a more combative approach from the UK government towards the Scottish government, which will be certainly interesting for, well, people like us watching to see its effect on the independence movement.
Yeah, absolutely.
Also, then in his first year, as you touched on, fight poverty. He wants to fight poverty. Humza Yousaf does. He said that's his number one issue that he wants to be judged on. Like when Nicola Sturgeon came in and she spoke about closing the poverty-related attainment gap, he's talking about fighting poverty. And that big Daily Record front page yesterday or the day before, where he promised to tax the rich. He wants to bring in wealth tax. That could be really interesting times. I mean, we're going to hear a lot from the UK government about uneven playing fields, how he's going to be disadvantaging Scotland and all this. But some of Scotland's largest landowners, I mean, definitely the largest landowner is a Danish owner of ASOS, off the top of my head. I'm not very good with clotheslines. It might be a different clothesline. But billions and billions this guy's got, tens and thousands of acres of Scottish land. So a wealth tax could be a way to bring in some extra money from these people that are essentially holding assets in Scotland and watching them appreciate in value. I mean, yeah, it will be really, really interesting stuff. Really interesting stuff.
Yeah, it might be interesting to see if he considers getting rid of council tax as well. That's something the SNP have. That's a non-progressive tax. And the SNP have talked about getting rid of that for a long, long time. So it'd be interesting to see if that's something that pops up on his agenda at some point.
Yeah, I think if you're 16 and you're in the SNP and you've just voted for Humza Yousaf, then the SNP have promised to reform council tax since before you were born. At this point, they've been doing it for an awful long time. Humza Yousaf did say to me when I spoke to him about council tax on the campaign trail that it would be top of his in tray. That's the direct quote. Right, I also heard him say that for several other issues, and realistically, you can only have one thing on the top of your in tray. So we will see. We will see. A lot of promises get made in leadership elections, an awful lot of them.
Should we quickly go through what's going to happen tomorrow, just before we go, or?
Yes, yeah. Let us know what is going to happen tomorrow.
I'll try. So just to make it clear that obviously, I mean, as far as we can tell, Humza Yousaf is going to become the First Minister of Scotland, but that is not official at the moment. The Scottish Parliament will recommend who they want as First Minister, and then I think the King appoints the presiding officer recommends the First Minister that is selected to the King. And that's kind of what will happen tomorrow. And then after the First Minister is selected, they will be sworn in officially at the Court of Session in Edinburgh on Wednesday. So there's going to be things happening throughout the week, and there's going to be plenty of stuff going on our website tomorrow as that all plays out. So, but like we say, I think that it's pretty much set in stone who's going to be First Minister tomorrow. But you may see other parties put forward nominations. I think when I was looking at who had been nominated in the past for First Minister, there was one year, I think it was 2001, where 7 nominations were put forward, which is quite incredible. I don't think you'll see 7, maybe 2 or 3. No more than that, I don't think. But that's you might see the Tories put someone forward. You may see Labour put someone forward. But I don't know.
I think the Tories might. They love a little sushi, don't they? They love putting Douglas Ross forward. So I think they might. But I'd be surprised if anybody else does. I think it's probably Yousaf versus Ross, and I think we all know how that's going to go.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if it's anybody else, to be honest. But particularly as Anna Sawa just spoke about Humza Yousaf as being the First Minister already today. So.
Yeah. All right. Well, we will look at winding it up there. I'm just having a quick look at the comments and seeing here. I've spotted that one person has suggested that it's now time for a referendum on closing the Scottish Parliament. Now, you might actually get one of those out of the Westminster government. You never know. Yeah. Whether or not
it's more likely than Section 30.
Whether or not it's going to be top of Humza Yousaf's in tray, I cannot say. Well, I can say. But yeah, we will leave it there for the evening. Thanks everybody for tuning in. And just, I know I've said it already, but if there's literally anything you need to know about this SNP leadership race, you will be able to find it on our website. That's thenational.scot. The same thing will be true tomorrow. We're going to be with you all through the day, following those progressions at Holyrood, following just everything that's happening, basically, which Sounds easier than it is, let us tell you, but we will continue doing our best. So yeah, thanks everybody for tuning in and good evening.
See you tomorrow.